Hey everyone, and welcome to La Roche FM, a podcast where design and business meet in the same place. Weekly talks with industry experts on how they do it. Let's begin the show. Hey everyone, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Douglas Davis. Hello Douglas.
What's going on? It's a pleasure to talk to you from Brooklyn.
Can you introduce yourself?
So my name is Douglas Davis. I'm an associate professor of advertising and design at New York City College of Technology in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. I'm also an adjunct design professor at Pratt Institute, and that's where I went for my first master's degree in communication design. But I also teach in a graduate program. It's a capstone program in the Branding and Integrated Communications program. It's like BIC, B-I-C, at City College. On the professional side, in 2011, I founded the Davis Group LLC. I'm the principal. We offer strategic solutions to client branding, digital, and design problems. And I guess lastly, I'm a new author. 2016, I wrote Creative Strategy in the Business of Design as really a response to the ways in which that our profession was changing. So on any given day, I'm either practicing, teaching, writing, or speaking about design.
How did you get into the creative field?
Wow. Well, I think looking back, I guess I could describe my story as the professor who had no plans to go to college. I'm from a really little small town in South Carolina, which is in the South in America. And at the same time, it had an outstanding art program. And so from K through 12, I was, drawing, painting, doing printmaking, rock carving, ceramics, sculpture, you name it. We were doing this. And I really thought to myself, I think during probably the 11th grade summer, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll go to summer school. And I'll take all my college requirements and I'll take the SAT, which is the college entrance exam in America. I'll take that as many times as possible because if I don't go to college, I want it to be because I decided not to go, not because I couldn't go. So I do all that stuff on my own. I graduate high school and I have literally no plans to go to college. I didn't apply to any college or anything like that. So I was volunteering in a city that was probably next to our city, maybe 15 minutes. And I stumbled onto a conversation about a college that was in Virginia, 2 states up. And so I had all the college requirements, thank goodness. So I applied for fashion merchandising. So I get to the school and they phased out the program. So I thought to myself, okay, well, my fashion interest was just like a symptom of my art, desire. So let me try this graphic design thing. I've never done that before. Let me learn photography. I've never done that before. And that's literally how I got into the field. It's because I hadn't done it before. And I said, maybe let's try it. So yeah, not so deliberate.
Why did you decide to write a book about strategy?
Yeah. I mean, when I really look at it, when I really think about it, I wrote this book as a response to the shift that we're in the environment. Personally, I found myself doing well in design. I could write the proposal. I could design the work. I could, manage the freelancers. All those things were great because of my design education, undergraduate as well as graduate school at Pratt. And as a result, when that happens, you're invited to more meetings or you find yourself in a client-facing role. And that's where a different discussion is taking place. And at some point, I hit a wall with my ability to justify my creative or aesthetic decisions. And that was in the context of like business or marketing goals that everybody was trying to achieve. And so really looking back, I realized that I just flat out didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding of how to speak the language of strategy. So I fell back into my creative comfort zone. And so when we were arguing on the basis of, why should we do this or why should we not do this, I was talking about typefaces and colors and composition. And I was losing those battles because the people who I was talking to were business people. They were marketing people. They were CEOs. They were people who understood why we were doing these things. And so it's funny because years later, I went back and I went to NYU and I got an integrated marketing degree. And there I met one of the most amazing people in the strategy field. Her name was Dr. Marjorie Coulter, and she would say, "I love it is not a compelling business rationale." And so, again, I lost those battles in the process. But then one day I stumbled into a strategy session, and that really was the beginning of my quest, personally, to understand the words behind the pictures or the strategy behind the execution. But it was also my introduction to learning the language that's spoken on the other side of the brain. But even then, after I understood it, it took me time to become familiar with those tools. So that's why I wrote it. I saw how things were changing, and I wanted to get out ahead of it. You know, there was a time I remember way back, probably in maybe about 1999, when I was, coming out of graduate school after entering into the field. And you could choose then whether you wanted to be a print designer or a web designer. And now, obviously, you can't choose that. That's not a choice anymore.
Yeah.
But back when I was making this decision around 2007, when I started to see the pitches and the things that we were being asked to do, the opportunities that we were missing out on, I realized, hey, you know what? I need to get out in front of this. So that's why I wrote the book, because it really chronicles my experiences as a designer, remaining relevant as things shifted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So why do brands and companies need a well-defined strategy behind their products and services when selling them?
Yeah. This is a really good question, and I always like to get this out of the way. I don't know the right answer, but I know what I think, and here's what I think. The reason that we're in the room is because of the fact that business involves way more than just making things pretty. No product just stumbles this way onto the market. It doesn't happen that way. And it's weird at the same time that most design programs don't teach business or marketing, even though it's the whole point of why we're in the room in the first place. So it's clear that these products are not there by accident. And it's also clear that us creative people, designers, are in the room so that we can help those products, brands, or services build relationships with the customers that they're trying to reach. So again, it's very interesting, the fact that I had to literally go through undergraduate design at Hampton University, graduate studies at Pratt Institute, to then get into the field, do really well, go as far as I could go, and then lose because I didn't know how to speak the language of the reason that we were in the room in the first place. So again, the reason why, it's pretty clear to me why. And I think as a result, designers and creative people need a very well-defined strategy as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what would be the benefits of approaching, let's say, a project? Let's say there is a new brand on the market. They are selling, let's say, headphones, and they need a really good presentation website in order to convert new leads and so on, and new buyers, and also tell the story of the product. What would be the benefits of approaching this project with a strategy behind it, and what would be the benefits or maybe the cons of just making it pretty?
Yeah. So part in the book that I have has, what they say versus what we hear. They would be the suits, the marketing people, the other people on your team in the agency who are not the creative team. And in your example, The point was to convert new leads, as you said, right? So obviously the point is to sell more headphones. If we want to boil it all the way down, that's the business objective, volume. But in order to do that, we need to be able to be searchable. We need to be able to be found by the group of people who we're trying to target in the first place, right? So all of these things that I'm talking to you about are just the nuts and bolts of the whole point that we're in the room. Then the creative people enter. I think the pros are obviously the fact that though you were asked for a new website, you understand why the website is asked for. And I think that's the translation that we have to go through in our head as creative people. Again, if we weren't taught business, you have to learn how to translate what people are asking you for. So at the end of the day, the client in your example is coming to us as a creative person with various forms of the same question. Solve my problem. Tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. I want to sell more headphones. It's so simple, but it's not the way that we were trained. There's a big gap in that. So the benefit becomes I can translate that on the fly and understand why you need the website. And from there, I won't propose things that are outside of the reason why you came to me in the first place, because I understand the business and the marketing objectives. I get who you're trying to reach as a result of that website. I can understand those people and then therefore add that into what I'm proposing design-wise, color-wise, composition-wise, functionality-wise, right? Then because of that, since as a creative person, I'm walking into the room understanding what keeps the CEO up at night, what keeps the marketing manager awake at night. See, if we as creative people can address the metrics that we're trying to hit and we can speak to our design decisions within the context of what the work should achieve, then our typeface choices or our composition, all that stuff is rooted in what the target audience will respond to. And at that point, the conversation shifts, because then at that point, we as a creative team are an asset. We can be strategic partners who grow businesses and move needles. However, on the other side, if I'm just a creative person, I just land up in the room, I hear we need a new website, I go off and I start to create all kind of stuff that has no basis in anything that we're trying to do or any respect to your brand. Let's say this brand was not a new brand. Let's say we're just launching a new product, right? So I'm just literally like grabbing from wherever, whatever the coolest thing is and trying to make this thing look great and, doing whatever I want to do because I like it versus it makes sense for your business, right? Then I'm coming into the room trying to sell you something that I like. It's pretty. And yet it's divorced from the business reason that you want it. So now I'm defensive. I'm upset with you because you don't understand what I'm showing you. Now I think you're stupid. And now I'm defensive. The whole room is like angry and like you don't sell the work. You might even get fired because of the fact that you can't control your emotions. So the cons are, as I described in my earlier story, but also in this situation, if you walk into the boardroom and you try to defend your design decisions for design's sake, you will lose every time. No client or business wants to hear somebody talk about typeface, or, client or business person wants to hear somebody talk about typefaces or colors. That stuff is subjective to them. They don't breathe or eat or sleep design like we do. So it's a complete losing battle if you walk in as a designer without speaking the language that's spoken on the other side of the brain. Those are the pros and cons.
So how would you approach, let's say I'm a client and I come to you and I say I have this product and I want more sales, of course. How would you personally approach defining the strategy behind the product?
There are a lot of clarifying questions at that point. So let's say that literally was the extent of the brief. Then there would be quite a few follow-up questions, right? How long have you been in the market? Are you a challenger or are you like the top,
let's play
competitor.
a game role here. So just ask me
Sure.
typical questions. I'm just gonna make something up.
So these are my questions, right? So how long have you been in the market? Let's say you're AMRO. This is one of my recent clients. I just finished something for them. I mentioned them because I know that you may be aware of them because they're a Dutch bank, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was doing some things in their American market here that I just finished up. So let's say you're that bank. That's who we're going to play the role for.
Yeah, and we're on the market for around, I'm not sure, like 20 years or something, or even more than that.
Okay, so you've been around for quite some time, and you want to. What is your ultimate business objective? What would you like to achieve? How do you define success?
We want these new generations that are coming to open, let's say, more bank accounts in our banks, rather than going to our competitors. So we would like to appeal to the youth, new generation that is coming.
So some part of this is a brand sort of preference problem. Another part of this is understanding, after we can get a very clear understanding of the habits and the behaviors of this new generation. So let's say it sounds like you're talking about millennials.
Yep.
And so I would then determine, based on exactly what you'd like to achieve and who you'd like to talk to, I'd determine who your competitors were. Because if you think about it, competition is relative to how we're defining competition in the first place. So in terms of that, right, so it sounds like you would like for the younger people to open this up. So in some ways, you know that younger people are always on their iPhones. They're always, they, in a sense, they've never actually had to take a roll of film to be developed. They've never had to wait for the prints. They've never had to scan them in. And then they've never had to, after that, upload them to sharing them. They take a picture with their phone and they share it to the world immediately. So because I understand their behavior, which again, I'd go into way more detailed, in-depth analysis about who your competitors are. I think ING Direct would be one of them. I think Ally Bank, if we're talking global, these are banks who have decided that they didn't want to compete on the retail side of things. They've just decided to be a virtual bank, a place where you can hold your money. Therefore, I would understand that we would need a lot of functionality that would allow the target that you're trying to talk to deposit remotely by taking pictures on their phone. I would, this is the exercise that I would go through. Ultimately, what I'm describing to you is half business, half creative, half marketing strategist, half like creative director who understands how we're going to start the job is completely and totally rooted in who we're talking to, what their behaviors are, and completely understanding the competitive set of the other people who you're trying to compete and basically take market share from, because that's what we're really talking about. So all of those things are like on the fly, are how I would sort of approach this as like an initial step. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to bore your listeners with really in-depth specifics about strategy, because it's abstract. It's all relative, just like design. It's relative to the problem that we're solving, and it's like a bespoke suit. In that way, you really have to sort of add in all the issues that you're trying to solve in order to come up with the parameters. But overall, if we can think how they think, we creative people can think how business, marketing, clients think to do what we do, then we're able to sell more work, because now I'm speaking to what keeps the CEO or the marketing manager or the brand manager up at night. I can decrease the fear in the room because as a creative person, I'm speaking the business language. I get you. I get your problem. I get how you're trying to solve it. And as a result, I can actually speak to you less in, abstract creative terms, more in the language that you understand. And then at that point, because I want you to take leaps with me, hopefully, I can make you comfortable being uncomfortable, taking the creative leaps that I'm trying to convince you to take with me because I understand business.
One of the important goals of strategy is, of course, reaching your target. So for reaching your target, you need a really good messaging that reaches the target audience. How, when working on the messaging, how should it be done? Do you have some sort of like a framework that you use when working on the messaging, or how do you do it?
I don't, but I can make it really simple in terms of the way that I approach it, which is relevance equals response. So some part of the answer that we just talked about in terms of really knowing your target inside and out. But I think the most important part of this answer that I'm going to say to creative people, because I know how sensitive we are about our work. I know how much we get, at some point, we get married to a certain solution, and it's very difficult to sort of talk someone out of something that they've already committed to, even though it doesn't work. Even though it's off brand or off strategy or off message, it's very difficult because we're emotional people. And I say we because I'm one of us. But I think the biggest thing and the most important thing that I can say in this concerning like crafting messaging or anything within the context of what we do is that you're not the target. I don't even care if you're the same age or if you're in the same age range as the target that we're trying to reach. You are not the target. You're never the target. And as long as you can be clear about that, then you can understand that I am a part of a system that is supposed to communicate on behalf of this brand to build a relationship with these people, that target. I am a part of that. I cannot get in the way of that. My emotions get in the way of that. Defensiveness will get in the way of that. But if I can understand that I'm not the target, then I'm not biased by what I like, what I would do, and therefore now I'm listening for what they like, what they would do. I can now look on blogs. I can now look at different places where there are comments and ratings about the moment of truth. This is what I like to call the moment of truth. There's what the brand says about itself, and then there's what actually happens. There's the real experience of the people that we're trying to talk to. So if I'm crafting a message, I'm looking for that gap. I'm looking for if there are inconsistencies. I want to know in the middle, is there a tension between what we say about ourselves as the brand and what the customer or the target is experiencing about our brand, product, or service? At that point, that's where I know how to focus on what the message should actually be. So again, all of my answers to your questions start with, why are we doing this? Who are we talking to? And what are we trying to achieve? And as a result of understanding those things, I can then figure out what the target needs to hear. But let's go further. What is the customer journey like? So specifically, our example earlier was the bank. I think AB and AMRO. I can never get that right, and I hope I did. But, in that case, they wanted to talk to a younger audience, right? So as a result of that, when you think about that particular bank and crafting a messaging for them, we have to understand who they're talking to and what is the lexicon or what are the types of things that target says. Starter kits, that's a part of what the target talks about and what they say. We can figure out where they're speaking, and then we can figure out what they need to know. Do they trust banks? Do they, do they feel like it's a complete waste of time to have to actually show up to a bank to deposit or withdraw money? Like, does that literally not even occur to them? If so, we need to know that so we can craft that sort of messaging, those benefits of using our bank into the messaging. Those are the types of things that I go through in order to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Nowadays, there is like tons and tons of messages each day through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of these social media, news, and so on. So we get bombarded every day with tons of messages. How can somebody get through the modern message clutter?
I think we have to tell the truth. When I'm talking to my creative teams or training professionals, I speak a lot internationally or just around the United States. And in my graduate classes where we have clients, I'm relentless about being honest. Luke Sullivan, one of the gentlemen who I really admire, he wrote a book called he wrote several books, but the one I'm talking about specifically is Hey Whipple Squeeze This. So Luke Sullivan always talks about, well, what is the truest thing that you can say about your brand, your product, your service, the culture, the target that you're trying to reach? Like, what's the truest thing that you can say? I think what I love about that is that he's basically helping us to make the distinction. He talks a lot about this between truth and fact. Truth is technical. It's like when a doctor talks to you and they give you all these technical terms that you never studied, and you're like, what the heck? Just tell me what's wrong with me, and then they say you have cancer. It's the difference between understanding this from fact, which is all the technical stuff. That's still true, but it's fact. It's stated to you and communicated to you in terms of fact. The truth is, oh my gosh, I have cancer. That's so much more easily understood when you're trying to communicate it. So there's a difference between truth and fact, but you have to be honest and you have to find the truth so that you can figure out how to communicate it and then be relevant. There's so many messages out there because you can communicate whatever you want to say. Anybody, like you or I, we could broadcast as much as we want to say whenever we want to say. If you're paying attention in America, unfortunately, we have a president who tweets every little thing that comes into his head. So like there's so much clutter because you can say whatever you want to say, whether you should be saying it or not. But because of the proliferation of channels, like you can say whatever and everybody can. So I think we have to tell the truth, but we have to be relevant and we have to focus on like content as well as context. So if we determine what we're going to say for our brand, why we're going to say it, if we understand who we're saying it to, what they need, if we understand who our competitors are in the context of like what we want to compete on, if we want to understand like how we want to be positioned brand wise, then we can figure out how we're going to say it and with what content and in what context and on what platform. All those things start to clarify themselves so that you can actually cut through the clutter by being honest, like telling the actual truth about something. Domino's, again, these are all examples from Luke Sullivan. But Domino's Pizza, it's a pizza brand in America. Maybe you might have heard of it as well. But the pizza used to taste like cardboard. That was the truth, And so it was probably because the company was founded by someone who was more concerned with logistics than they weren't like someone who had a pizza restaurant in their heritage. So they were more about like 30 minutes or it's free. We're going to get it to you. We're going to get it to you. So some of, the truest things that you could end up saying about nasty pizza is that it's an alcohol sponge, right? I'm going to drink it. I'm going to eat it because I'm drinking and I want something to eat, but I'm not really in the best frame of mind right now. So I'll just eat anything. Let's get this easy thing to get because it's going to come in 30 minutes or it's free, Those are some of the best words that you can hear if you're drunk, right? So I think if you talk about the truest thing that you can say about the category, then you can get down to the truest thing that you can say about the actual product itself or the brand itself or the service itself. If you can be relevant, then you can focus on the content and context. And at that point, you're saying something that no one else is saying. If you're familiar with things, things turned around for Domino's because they changed. And that's just one example, again, from Luke Sullivan's book and what he talks about. But it's a great example. I think we have to say something that people aren't saying in a different way.
Let's say that we decided what we're doing with our messaging part, and it's time to tell about our product, or let's say our service. And we come down to features and benefits. First of all, what are the features and benefits of a product? How do we define them?
So if you think of features like the physical features of a person, so you can be a certain height, you can have a certain color hair, certain color eyes, certain shaped nose or size ears, those sorts of things. Maybe you have freckles, maybe you don't have freckles. Those, long hair, short hair. These are physical features. Products have physical features as well. So if you think about your laptop computer or an iPhone, for instance, some of those features are like the front-facing camera, the storage size on the phone, the fact that it has a certain amount of megapixels in the camera itself, the processing speed, the fact that it's got a GPS on the inside of it. All those are physical features. So again, when you think about features, right, you're just literally looking at, well, what are the things that make up the product itself, right? Then you figure out what the benefits are. Now, think about this. Brands are concerned with features, right? Because they're making these products that they're trying to sell. People are concerned with benefits. So when you can align the benefits and the features from what the brand and the product care about, or the brand, product, or service care about, what they're offering, to who they're trying to talk to, the target, then you can figure out which features, which literally you can isolate specific features that enable specific benefits to your target. And that's where the magic happens, because if you really think about the amount of things that like an iPhone or a computer does, or a car, for instance, there's so many different features in that car. You can then figure out what the benefits are. So if the car is like a higher end car, like a Maserati or something like that, you know up front that this really isn't about going from A to B in terms of like just getting from one place to the other. It's actually about your face as you see me pull up as I'm driving from A to B, right? So it's really more about the design of the car and how, like, what that says about me. The benefit is that you see me in a certain way as a result of the design. If you really look at this, certain products are sold in a more emotional way. So cars are actually sold in a more emotional way. But technology, going back to the iPhone, is sold in more of a rational way. So all these different like features are important, because as a customer or a target who's looking at multiple phones or computers to buy, what am I doing? Well, I'm educating myself on which computer has the exact features for what I want to do on that computer for how much money it costs. So this is how you can understand whether you want to get into writing, like when it's time to design. This is how you get to understand, well, what is our approach? It ends up being, well, what are we selling? And how does the target actually even understand the information? Is it more of a emotional appeal? Do I need to speak to someone's heart, the target's heart, to speak about the benefits of our product? Or do I need to speak to their head to talk about like the features of what they're buying? All of those things are there to help us craft messaging. And that's where values come in, right? Because if our brand values design and I value design, then now we have something in common. And at that point, we can start the conversation a little farther along, because now our relationship, when we connect as designers, we connect the brand and the product and the person together. Now we know what we can say to them. Now we know how we can enter the conversation. Now we know whether the headlines or any of the typography or copy parts of this should start with a feature. Should we have a feature statement as a headline? Should we have a benefit statement as a headline? One is more rational, one is more emotional. But you have to connect them both together so that you can understand which feature enables which benefit, because this is how you connect the brand and the target.
What is a creative strategy framework, and what are the benefits of using one?
So the creative strategy framework is something that I wrote and developed when I was at NYU in the integrated marketing program. It has 4 columns and 3 steps. And you use it for this sort of depends on what your job is within the creative sort of hierarchy. If you're a creative director, you can use this to focus your creative team's executions in ways that ensure that they'll deliver on brand, on strategy, and on message. If you are not in the creative team and you're like a brand strategist or a strategist, or if you're like an account person, someone who works with a creative team, then you can actually use this as a basis to write creative briefs so that you can ensure that your words are inspiring the creatives to come up with multiple viable solutions. So how does it work? There are 4 columns and 3 steps. The 4 columns, the first column is the target. And as we've been talking, you define that target in as many ways, specifically including demographics, psychographics, how they think, and their behavior characteristics. So I always like to get as many fragments as possible in that first column in order to figure out who we're talking to. Second column is the facts. And the facts are on the brand, product, or service. And that's something that you're going to have to decide up front so that you can figure out what the facts are on. Now, these facts include you going beyond the website of the company. You have to go beyond what they say about themselves. You have to go to forums and places where people are being unfiltered about what they say in their ratings and how they talk about whatever their experience is. You need to know those things because facts are both good and bad, but they're true. That's what we're looking for. They can be brand heritage, things that the company did back in the day. You might be able to put in there like BMW's engineering roots, how they actually came up with their logo itself. Like all these things are really important. But they're all facts and they should go in the second column. Third is the feature benefit column, and that's what we've been talking about before. These are us deciding to look at whatever the brand is or the product or the service is, and then literally just like outlining which individual feature enables this particular benefit to the target that we're trying to reach. So you just literally just name them all, and you try to this is where you try to connect the brand and the target. Message or objective. Now, this determines, we can sort of figure out which one or the other or have both. That all depends on the priority. So if we're going for new business and we want to propose not only a brand campaign, but also specific messaging, as well as we want to, let's say, so that's one option, like a brand campaign with specific messaging. But we also want to hit specific objectives that we know are important to whoever we're working for. We can come up with both. If we know what we're doing up front, if the kickoff meeting said, hey, guys, we need to move the needle by 15% among, this particular target, then we just put the objective in. If the kickoff meeting was more brand in nature, or if there was a crisis that happened that we need to address within the brand or the product or the services category, or if they had a particular crisis, this particular brand had a crisis, there might be a particular message that we want to actually talk about. At that point, we can use one or the other. So step 1 is really quantity. Based on all those different categories, you're just putting things in there. And if you're running this from like a whiteboard creative team session as the creative director, I've learned that it's important to sort of hang back and let your creatives, get in there and do it. They're the ones who are filling up the information. And you always have to remind anyone engaging in this exercise is that strategy is only as good as the content or the information that you put into it. So it's only going to be as good as the thought that goes behind what you're putting in there, but you're not going to think about that necessarily on step one. Step one is just about quantity. Just get it in there, fill it up, exhaust the columns. Step two is where you want to actually think through and really question the information. So you're cleaning for quality on step two. And at that point, you're asking yourself, is this the real target? Is their behavior different? Did I just write someone's job description up here instead of just writing an actual person to target? So did we say librarians? Oh, that's not a target. That's a job. So we gotta erase that. Are we talking to women who read, who spend a lot of time reading books and who do that like 3 or 4 times a week and who spend a certain amount on books? That's a target, and that's a behavior. And I can also look at a psychographic. So I understand how their mind works. They value reading. They spend a lot of time doing it. They spend their money doing it. I can itemize all that. That's a target. So now you're clarifying those things, the facts on the brand, product, or service. So this column is really important because a lot of times the way that you'll erase what's there is by asking, can we build a campaign on that? Can we build concepts on that? So a fact could be as simple as the company was founded in 1995, which in a sense is not necessarily going to help you conceptually. You're not going to build necessarily a campaign talking only about the fact that we came about in 1995. So you then look at the quality of what you wrote there. Maybe you could write something that has to do with the fact that in the brand's heritage that they spoke to a certain target market, or they had a certain message way back in the 60s because they have heritage. This is all important. At that point, you could potentially come up with a campaign whose objective is to tap into that heritage. So that's going to be important to have as a fact. And so hopefully those examples tell you what doesn't matter and what does matter. And that's how you think through what you should erase and what you should keep in that second column. The third column is features and benefits. Now, this is really difficult because a lot of times it takes a couple of rounds in order to really make sure that you're looking at a feature as a feature and that you're articulating it as a benefit to a target. Because sometimes in the very beginning, young creatives will just write a feature on both sides of this ratio so it'll be a feature and a feature, or it'll be a benefit and a benefit, versus understanding that one is tangible and one is intangible. So for example, the example of people. So I have hearing, right? So it comes from my ears. That's the feature, my ears, my hearing. The benefit is that I could step out of traffic before the car hits me, even if I'm not looking at the car. So I could save my life as a result of the fact that I could hear a truck coming. So you need to figure out what tangible part of the brand, that front-facing camera, what is the intangible benefit for your target group? And you need to articulate it that way. And that's the way you just sort of check in to make sure that you're actually writing features and then connecting them to benefits that they enable to your target. And then lastly, in the last column, the message or the objective. So if we're doing a brand campaign, you want to just say it straight. So if I want you to understand that the iPhone is the easiest way to have work and play all in one, on the go, at all times, that's what I want you to understand. But I'm not going to write that in the work, right? I'm not going to actually literally verbatim say that, but that's what I want you to take away once you come into contact with the work, the app, the banners, the website, the whatever we're doing. That's what a message is, and that's how you define it. What do I want you to take away? And I'm going to say it straight, but we're not going to copyright or anything in the actual strategy, because you never want your strategy to show in the work. This is a really important point. Objectives are, what are we doing? What are we increasing, driving, decreasing? acquiring. Like, what are we, like, they're verbs. We're going to increase the amount of traffic to this website by a certain percent. We're going to, drive up the amount of downloads of our app by this amount. We want to drive down the amount of people who cancel our service by this amount. These are like what we're doing. So again, the quickest way that you can get the value out of this tool is that if you start to write your notes from kickoff meetings directly into like the format of the chart itself. And then when you're going back to the creative team to brainstorm after the meeting, you can then take your notes and use them as a whiteboard session directly where you left off. I know for me, information overload was a big issue whenever I started to learn business. And I've used this framework to develop client recommendations for new business pitches, uncovering strategic threads that allow me to like come up with a bunch of conceptual ideas. I use threads that I pull out for the basis of developing strategic documents such as creative briefs, or I'll like start a group strategy session or like a thought starter tool. And the way that works is now that you've gotten all the things in different columns, you're now looking across columns to connect this target with this fact that they would be interested in, with this particular feature and benefit that we can write the copy about to accomplish this objective or to impart this message. So you can pull out a bunch of threads. You can sort of like come up with infinite amounts of configurations, and then you can write your creative brief to it, or you can like just come up with like actual ideas to start to design things from. I know that was a long explanation, but hopefully it's clear. The book has it more in depth.
It was really in depth.
That's the way strategy works.
Yeah. Let's suppose that I'm just getting started with the strategy. I'm a new CEO of my own company, just started this product, and I'm not really that into strategy, and I don't have the money of hiring someone to do the strategy for me. What would be some practical steps for me to do when, let's say, approaching this product and working on this product in order to get from that amateur stage to something better?
As like from the standpoint of a business owner, like an entrepreneur or something? Well, I think the important part there is to understand what the creative team does, even though you're a business person, right? Because at the end of the day, that business person needs to understand a target. They need to impart a certain message. And really, because of their branding, they need to differentiate themselves from anyone else who's competing with them. So because those are just the facts, I think then it becomes really important to understand what a creative team would do so that you can be informed in how to empower them to help you, if that makes any sense. And I would sort of say it that way because I know that since business programs don't teach how to inspire designers, the issue there is that they're learning all the things that we were never taught as designers, but they never understand what we do as designers. And they also don't understand that there's a process that they can inspire, a creative process that they can inspire. So a lot of times I've been in situations where I'll get a brief where it is like as thick as like, a novel, because they threw every piece of information they could find in there without discerning what the information should be. Like, what do I need to know to do my job? So in that case, a business owner should understand what designers do and what the process is so that they can cherry pick the things that would inspire us as creatives. On the other side, as a designer, let's say you are someone who is like a solopreneur, entrepreneur, like a freelancer, and you wanted to pitch business. So therefore you needed to know business, to speak the language of business, to get more business. I think, the thing I want to say, and the fact that this has been a really in-depth sort of conversation between us, is that strategy is not for everybody. I had to learn how to make myself pay attention because I knew it was important for the long term. But I remember sitting at NYU wanting somebody to shoot me in the face just to get it over with, because it's really difficult stuff. So to any listeners who are worrying about this being too complicated or heavy, it is. but so is going to the gym. So is the reason why, it's hard. It's the reason why your mom is always on your back about drinking enough water or eating healthy. It's essential to your survival in the creative field as it evolves. So to any creatives out there, it's going to be really important that you sort of put your toe in, and then you put your foot in, then you put your leg in. It's no different from any of the other things that you had to really decide to commit to. Almost like learning Photoshop, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so big, it's so vast. You got to dive in, and you need to learn it. So you just do. Or coding, like, oh my gosh, I hate this coding. One little thing messes up and it screws up the whole page. Yeah, exactly. So figure out what's messed up and fix it. Strategy is the literal same way. You have to decide that it's important and invest. So that's what I'd say to both sides.
Coming to a close now, what would be some book recommendations, maybe regarding strategy, or let's say the best books that influenced your career and helped you as a designer and strategist?
So one of those books is a book that I mentioned earlier, Luke Sullivan, Hey Whipple Squeeze This. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read on just the creative process and how things work, how to develop these things if you're not a writer, how to write, how to, develop and craft creativity. So Luke Sullivan's Hey Whipple Squeeze This, excellent. Another one is Truth, Lies, and Advertising. It's the Art of Account Planning. It's by John Steele, and John is written with Jonsteel. That was a really great book, specifically if we're talking about, I think chapter 5 is called The Fisherman's Guide, and it's all about writing creative briefs. Really, really good, especially whenever you're a senior creative, or if you're not a creative and you need to write the words that are supposed to inspire your creative team. That's a really good one. Juicing the Orange is another one that I really love. How to turn creativity into a powerful business advantage. It's by Pat Fallon, and I really do admire the work that he's done, and it has a lot of really awesome case studies in it. So it breaks down the specifics of how we should, as creatives, approach solving business problems. So those are the 3 books that really have influenced my career.
Douglas, thank you very much for being here today. You shared a lot
Absolutely.
of knowledge, and I think the book you wrote is a must-read for sure. Where people can find your book, actually?
So you can find Creative Strategy in the Business of Design on Amazon. If you're in the United States, you can. I was just literally at Harvard for a design conference just this past weekend, and I realized, oh my gosh, it's at the Harvard bookstore. So if you're in Massachusetts, you can go to the Harvard Co-op. It's there. It's in Barnes and Noble, Amazon, mydesignshop.com. It's all over the place, and I hope you get it. And if you do get it, please reach out to me. I love to hear from people in terms of how the content might have helped them. So my email address is in the back of the book, or you can go to thinkhowtheythink.com.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.